Lena stood by the window, staring out at the small, quiet town she had called home for most of her life. The familiar sights, the old oak tree by the schoolyard, the winding streets lined with houses, had begun to feel like a cage, enclosing her in a world she no longer fit into. She had always dreamed of something more, something beyond the boundaries of the town, and today, she had finally made the decision to leave it behind. She would move to the city. Her parents had tried to persuade her to stay. "What will you do in the city? It's too big for you," her mother had said. But Lena had made up her mind. She wanted to experience the world beyond her little town, to meet new people, learn new things, and most of all, to find herself. The decision had been difficult, but Lena knew that it was the only way to break free from the constraints of her old life. Packing her bags felt surreal. It was as if she was packing not just clothes, but a whole life, one that had shaped her, but one that she had outgrown. The night before her departure, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what awaited her. Was it courage or fear that drove her? She couldn't tell, but she was sure of one thing: she couldn't stay any longer. The city was calling her, and it was time to answer. The next morning, Lena boarded the train with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The familiar scenery of her hometown blurred behind her as the train picked up speed, and she felt a pang of regret. Perhaps she was making a mistake. But as the city skyline came into view, all doubts seemed to fade away. This was where she belonged. A new life was waiting for her, one full of possibilities. When Lena first arrived in the city, it felt like stepping into a dream. The streets were alive with movement, the buildings towering above her, and the sounds of a million conversations filled the air. The city seemed endless, like a maze of opportunities and challenges. She felt both overwhelmed and exhilarated, like a small fish swimming in a vast ocean. But despite the chaos, there was something undeniably exciting about it. She rented a small apartment in a quiet part of the city, far from the busy center. It wasn't much, but it was hers. The first night she spent there was strange, quiet, yet full of the anticipation of what was to come. Lena stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. She knew that this place, this city, would change her. It was inevitable. Days turned into weeks, and Lena began to settle into her new life. She found a job at a local bookstore, surrounded by the smell of paper and ink. She had always loved books, and the idea of being surrounded by them every day brought her a sense of peace. But even with the comfort of her new job, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The city was vast, but she still felt a little lost. One afternoon, while walking through the park, Lena met a woman named Clara. Clara was an artist, someone who seemed to know exactly what she wanted from life. They struck up a conversation, and soon, Lena found herself opening up about her fears and dreams. Clara listened intently, offering wisdom and encouragement. "Sometimes, you have to lose yourself in order to find your true path," Clara said, and Lena couldn't help but feel that those words had been meant for her. That evening, Lena sat alone in her apartment, reflecting on what Clara had said. It felt like a turning point. Perhaps she had been so focused on finding a specific path that she had forgotten to simply let life unfold. She didn't need all the answers right now. She just needed to trust the journey. As the days passed, Lena began to embrace the uncertainty of her new life. She explored different parts of the city, meeting new people and experiencing things she had never imagined. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt and loneliness, but she knew she was growing. And for the first time in a long time, She felt free. Lena's days in the city became a mixture of excitement and struggle. The bookstore was small, and while it was a place she loved, it didn't pay much. She had to take on extra work to make ends meet, juggling odd jobs and late nights. It was exhausting, but she kept telling herself that it was all part of the process. She had come to the city to find herself, and this was part of that journey. There were moments when the weight of it all felt too heavy. One evening, after a long day at the bookstore, Lena collapsed onto her bed, feeling the strain in every muscle. She had hoped that moving to the city would somehow be easier, but reality had proven otherwise. The city didn't offer comfort or ease, it demanded everything from you. But as she lay there, she reminded herself of her dreams. She hadn't come this far to give up. It was on one of these challenging days that Lena ran into Clara again. Clara could always see the weight in Lena's eyes, and she knew exactly what to say. "You're doing well," Clara said, as they sat at a small cafe. "The city is a hard teacher, but it's a great one. It will test you, break you down, but if you keep going, it will make you stronger than you ever imagined." Lena wasn't so sure, but Clara's words gave her a glimmer of hope. Maybe the struggle wasn't something to avoid, but something to learn from. It was hard to see at the time, but Lena was beginning to understand that the hardest challenges were often the ones that led to the most growth. Weeks turned into months, and Lena slowly started to adjust. She began to find her rhythm in the city, even though life was still far from easy. The bookstore became a sanctuary for her, a place where she could escape the noise of the world and lose herself in the stories of others. She also began to connect with people, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers who had their own stories to tell. But with each passing day, Lena's doubts grew. Was she truly living the life she had dreamed of? Or was she just surviving? She began to wonder if she was running away from something, if the city was just a distraction from her true purpose. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper she was meant to find. One evening, Lena sat in the park, watching the sunset. She felt a deep sense of loneliness, even though she was surrounded by people. Her thoughts raced, and for the first time in months, she wondered if she had made the right decision. Had she made the right choice by leaving her old life behind? Was she truly finding herself, or was she just getting lost in the chaos? But as the night fell and the city lights began to shine, Lena realized that it didn't matter. Whether she was lost or found, she was exactly where she needed to be. She had come to the city in search of something, and while she hadn't found all the answers yet, she had found something even more valuable, the strength to keep moving forward. And so, Lena embraced the struggle. She realized that life wasn't about having all the answers or finding the perfect path. It was about living, learning, and growing, no matter how difficult or uncertain the journey may seem. Months passed, and Lena's life began to shift in ways she hadn't expected. One cold winter morning, as she was walking to work, she stumbled upon an old, run-down theater. The marquee was faded, and the windows were covered with dust, but something about it called to her. She couldn't explain why, but Lena felt an undeniable urge to step inside. The theater was abandoned, its grandeur faded with time. But as Lena wandered through its empty halls, she felt a spark of something, an idea, a sense of purpose. There was something about the place, the emptiness that felt full of possibilities. She returned to the theater every day after work, fascinated by its potential. Slowly, she began to clean, to fix the broken chairs, and to imagine what it could be. It was during one of these visits that she met Marco, a young man who had lived in the city for years and had also been drawn to the theater. He was an actor, someone who had fallen out of love with the art but hadn't yet given up on it. Together, they began to dream of bringing the theatre back to life. Lena realized that the theatre wasn't just a building, it was a symbol. It was a reflection of her own journey, a place that had once been full of life, but had faded, just like her dreams had when she first moved to the city. And now, together with Marco, she would breathe new life into it. As they worked to restore the theatre, Lena found herself rediscovering her passion for creativity. She hadn't realized how much she missed it, how much she longed to be part of something that was not just about surviving, but about truly living. This was the discovery she had been waiting for. The city had tested her, challenged her, and had almost broken her, but now, it was giving her something she had never expected, a chance to create. The opening night of the theatre arrived, and the air was thick with excitement. Lena stood backstage, watching the audience fill the seats. She had never imagined that this moment would come, that the dream she had almost forgotten would come true. Marco was on stage, preparing for the play that would mark the beginning of the theatre's new life. As the curtain rose, Lena felt a wave of emotion. She had come so far, so many doubts, so many struggles. But here she was, witnessing the culmination of all her efforts. The theatre was alive again, not just as a building, but as a symbol of resilience and renewal. Lena knew that this was the moment she had been waiting for. After the show, Lena stood outside the theatre, looking up at the marquee. She realized that her journey wasn't about finding herself in a place or a job, but in the people she met, the experiences she had, and the courage to follow her dreams. She had left the small town in search of something greater, and in the end, she had found everything she needed within herself. Lena's story was just beginning. The city had changed her, yes, but more importantly, it had shown her that even in the most chaotic of places, there could be beauty, creativity, and fulfillment. She had learned to embrace the unknown, to trust the journey, and to keep moving forward, no matter what. And with the theatre now thriving, Lena knew she had found her true purpose, not in the answers she had been searching for, but in the questions that had led her to this new chapter of her life. As the months passed, Lena's life began to take on a new rhythm. The theatre had become her sanctuary, and Marco, who had become her closest friend, was there beside her every step of the way. Together, they worked tirelessly to transform the old space into a vibrant venue for artists and performers from all over the city. The theatre was no longer just a place of dreams, it was a beacon for those who had lost their way, just like Lena had when she first arrived. But despite the success they were beginning to experience, Lena's internal struggle remained. There were nights when the weight of the city seemed unbearable. The noise, the crowds, the endless rush, it all felt like a constant reminder of how small she sometimes felt. She would often find herself alone in the quiet corners of the theatre, reflecting on everything that had brought her here. Her thoughts would drift back to the small town she had left behind, and for the first time since moving to the city, Lena wondered if she had made the right decision. The city, with all its opportunity and excitement, often felt more isolating than liberating. She found herself questioning if she truly belonged here, or if she had simply been running away from something, perhaps the memories of the past, or a life that she could no longer identify with. One evening, Marco pulled her aside after a particularly long day of rehearsals. "You're quiet tonight," he said gently. "You've been pushing yourself so hard. Don't forget to breathe." Lena nodded, appreciating his words but unsure of how to respond. She wasn't sure if she could find the balance she needed. She had sacrificed so much to be here, and yet, there were moments when the emptiness crept in, reminding her that the road she had chosen wasn't as clear as it had once seemed. The next day, after much contemplation, Lena decided to take a break. It was a difficult choice, as everything seemed to be moving forward so quickly, but she knew that in order to truly find herself, she needed to step away and reconnect with her roots. She booked a train ticket back to her hometown, hoping that a brief return to the place she had left behind would offer the clarity she desperately sought. Returning to the small town felt surreal. As the train pulled into the station, Lena's heart raced. Everything looked exactly as she remembered, unchanged, frozen in time. She stepped out onto the platform, feeling both a sense of comfort and an overwhelming wave of nostalgia. The familiar sights, sounds, and smells of the town flooded her senses, reminding her of her childhood, her family, and the life she had once known. She walked through the old streets, past the schoolyard where she had spent countless afternoons playing with friends, and down to the river where she had spent hours staring at the water, dreaming of the world beyond. But as much as she longed for the simplicity of the past, Lena realized that she wasn't the same person who had left. She was different now, wiser, stronger, and more aware of her own desires. Lena visited her family's old house, which now stood empty. The door creaked as she opened it, and the silence inside felt both comforting and sad. She sat in the living room for a while, reflecting on how much her life had changed. She had left this place in search of something more, but now, sitting there, it was clear that the person she had been was no longer the person she had become. The person she was now belonged in the city, with all its chaos and unpredictability. She called her parents, who were thrilled to hear from her. Over dinner, they talked about how much they missed her and how proud they were of the life she had built in the city. Yet, as they spoke, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that they still saw her as the young girl who had left with big dreams but little understanding of what the world truly held. She wasn't sure if they could ever fully understand who she had become. By the time Lena boarded the train to return to the city, she realized that her visit had given her the closure she needed. Her hometown would always be a part of her, but it was no longer the place where she truly belonged. She had outgrown it, just as she had outgrown the person she was when she left. The city had become her home, and now, she was ready to embrace it completely. Back in the city, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her return to the small town had helped her realize that her journey was far from over. She wasn't running away from anything anymore. Instead, she was running toward the person she was becoming. The struggles she had faced, the doubts she had harbored, were all part of the process. The city, with all its hustle and uncertainty, was where she was meant to be. Lena threw herself back into her work at the theater, but this time, she did so with a sense of peace. She no longer felt the need to prove herself or find validation in the opinions of others. The people she had met in the city, Clara, Marco, and countless others, had shown her that life wasn't about perfection or certainty. It was about embracing the journey, no matter where it led. One evening, while walking through the theater after a successful performance, Lena paused to admire the space that had once felt so foreign to her. The seats were filled with eager faces, and the energy in the room was electric. This was her creation. She had worked tirelessly to bring this place to life, and now it was thriving, just like her. But even more than that, Lena realized that the theater had become a reflection of her own growth. It had been broken, abandoned, and forgotten, much like how she had felt when she first arrived in the city. But through hard work, dedication, and a willingness to embrace change, it had found new life. Lena smiled to herself, knowing that she too had undergone a transformation, And now, she was truly living the life she had always dreamed of. The opening of the theater's new season marked the beginning of a new chapter in Lena's life. She had found a place where she could not only create but also belong. The city, with its ever-changing pace and boundless opportunities, no longer intimidated her. Instead, it inspired her. Lena had become part of something bigger than herself, a community of artists, dreamers, and creators who were all chasing their own versions of fulfillment. With Marco by her side and the support of her new friends, Lena knew that her journey was far from over. There was still so much to explore, so much to learn, and so many more dreams to chase. But for the first time in a long time, she felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The theater had become a symbol of her own resilience. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult the road may seem, with time and perseverance, anything was possible. Lena had found her place in the city, not by running from her past, but by embracing all of it, the good, the bad, and the uncertain. As she looked out over the city skyline one evening, Lena felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had come so far, and yet, she knew this was only the beginning. The journey was just starting, and the world was full of endless possibilities. And with a heart full of hope and a spirit ready for whatever came next, Lena was ready to continue her adventure one step at a time. Months had passed since the opening of the new season at the theater, and Lena's life had settled into a rhythm. Yet, something inside her was beginning to stir again. The initial sense of achievement had given way to a quiet longing. Lena had built a life for herself in the city, a life filled with friends, work, and purpose, but there was a new desire emerging within her. She wanted to do more. She had always been drawn to the arts, but the theater had become more than just a job or a passion. It was a place of transformation, where stories came to life, and where people found themselves through the performances they created. Lena realized that it was time to step outside the shadows of others' dreams and create something of her own. The idea of directing her first play took root in her mind one evening as she watched a particularly moving performance at the theater. The actors, the set, the lighting, it all came together in such a beautiful way that it left Lena breathless. She knew that she had the skills, the vision, and the passion to create something equally as powerful. But it wasn't just the technical aspects of directing that called to her, it was the opportunity to shape a story, to explore new ideas, and to give a voice to characters that had yet to be heard. The next morning, Lena found herself sitting down with Marco, her trusted friend and collaborator. "I think I'm ready to direct," she told him, her voice filled with both excitement and fear. Marco smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I had a feeling you would say that," he replied. "You've been growing so much, and I think you're more than ready. I believe in you, Lena." With Marco's support, Lena began the process of selecting the play that would mark her debut as a director. She combed through scripts, looking for something that would resonate with her and with the audience. She wanted to create a piece that was not only entertaining but also meaningful. It had to challenge perceptions, open minds, and stir emotions. Directing a play was nothing like Lena had imagined. The process was far more complex, chaotic, and exhausting than she could have ever anticipated. There were long nights spent working with actors, endless discussions about character motivations, and constant revisions to the script. Every decision, every change seemed to take on monumental significance. It felt like the weight of the world was on her shoulders, and there were moments when she doubted her ability to carry it. One particular night, after a rehearsal that had not gone as well as she had hoped, Lena sat alone in her office, her head in her hands. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was failing as a director, failing as a leader, failing as someone who had put her faith in her own abilities. It seemed like no matter how hard she tried, things were not coming together as she had envisioned. Her phone buzzed, and it was a message from Marco. Take a breath. You're doing great. Trust the process, Lena. You've got this. His words were simple, but they struck a chord. Lena realized that she had been too focused on the end result and had forgotten to appreciate the journey. It wasn't about perfection, it was about the effort, the growth, and the learning that happened along the way. With renewed determination, she decided to give herself some grace and keep moving forward. The next rehearsal was a turning point. The actors were more engaged, the set was starting to come together, and Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She may not have everything figured out, but she was learning to trust her instincts and to be patient with herself. Directing was hard, yes, but it was also rewarding. And in that moment, Lena knew that this struggle was part of the creative process, and it was something she had to embrace. Opening night arrived with a sense of anticipation that Lena could hardly contain. The theater buzzed with energy as the final preparations were made. The cast was ready, the set was complete, and the audience was beginning to fill the seats. Lena stood backstage, her heart racing. The hours of rehearsal, the sleepless nights, the self-doubt, it had all led to this moment. As the curtain rose and the first scene unfolded, Lena felt a wave of emotion. This was her vision coming to life. She watched as the actors brought the characters to life, as the set transformed into a world of its own, and as the audience became completely immersed in the story she had helped create. It was a feeling she had never experienced before: pride, excitement, and a deep sense of accomplishment. The play was a success. The audience was captivated, and the critics had praised the production for its bold storytelling and powerful performances. For Lena, the most rewarding part was seeing how her actors had flourished under her direction. They had trusted her, just as she had trusted herself, and together, they had created something beautiful. That night, after the performance, Lena sat alone in her office, reflecting on everything that had brought her here. She had doubted herself so many times, but now, sitting in the quiet aftermath of her success, she realized that she had truly found her place in the world. This wasn't just a job or a dream, it was her purpose. The success of the play opened new doors for Lena. Her reputation as a director began to grow, and she received offers for other productions. But as her career began to take off, Lena felt a new sense of clarity. She wasn't interested in rushing into anything just for the sake of success. She wanted to create meaningful work, to continue to tell stories that mattered, and to collaborate with others who shared her passion for the arts. As the months passed, Lena continued to build on her newfound success. The theater thrived, and she developed deeper relationships with the actors and crew. Marco remained by her side, offering his support and guidance as she navigated the challenges of her growing career. Lena had found her voice, both as an artist and as a person, and with each project, she felt more confident in her ability to create something truly special. But Lena also realized that the journey she had embarked on was not just about the work, it was about the people she met along the way, the connections she had made, and the community that had embraced her. In the theater, she had found a family, one that extended far beyond the stage. And as she looked ahead, Lena knew that there was so much more to come: new stories to tell, new challenges to overcome, and new relationships to build. Lena had come a long way since the quiet, uncertain days when she first arrived in the city. She had faced her fears, embraced the unknown, and discovered her true purpose. And as she stood on the stage one evening, looking out over the crowd, she realized that the future was unwritten and it was hers to create. With the final curtain closing, Lena felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She had discovered the strength within herself to lead, create, and inspire. And as she looked out into the audience, she knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one full of endless possibilities. The applause echoed through the theater, a reminder of all the hard work, determination, and passion that had brought her here. Lena took a deep breath, letting the moment settle into her heart. She had faced countless challenges, doubted herself along the way, but in the end, she had persevered. The journey ahead was unknown, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came next. With a smile, she stepped off the stage, knowing that her story was only just beginning.